Hello ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to the world of Pokemon. I'm ProfNoki, and today we're traveling through the most unsettling, ancient, and haunted places in the Pokemon world. For the purposes of today's video, I have broken down these locations by various categories. These different categories are essentially dictated by the level of paranormal activity that is taking place at any given site. And to begin with, we have the category that I have called unsettling. These are locations that don't necessarily have any particular haunting or spectral apparition present in them, but just give you the overall heebie-jeebies and creeps whenever you're traveling through them or to them. And up first, we have the Pokemon Village in Kalos. And now, this isn't necessarily creepy unless you're somebody who does a lot of harm to Pokemon, as this village was created as a safe haven for Pokemon who had trainers perform unspeakable acts of violence and hatred against them. And this definitely makes my list for being one of the most somber and overall depressing, and even more so when you consider just how skittish these Pokemon are when you're first entering the village. And sticking with the Kalos region, we have the next entry on this list, which is Route 14. The overall theme of this route is an extremely decrepit, marshy, swampy, foresty type area with overgrown trees everywhere, with a winding path that takes you through this decrepit woods. Not only that, but this route hosts such features as a very creepy abandoned playground, a haunted house, a cemetery, hex maniacs galore, and not to mention the appearance of a number of haunters. And moving along in no particular order overall, we have Po Town in Alola. Situated on Ula Ula Island, this town has actually been abandoned ever since the thugs from Team Skull moved in and started causing trouble for the local residents. And from the looks of the extremely high walls and the fancy houses, I would say that this was probably some form of fancy gated community before Team Skull moved in and made it their personal playground. They destroyed property, graffitied over everything, trashed homes, and set up base in the now dilapidated mansion known as the Shady House. And I would consider this town rather unsettling due to the lack of society against a modern setting, much like a post-apocalyptic scene. The next entry on this list comes from Unova, and that would be N's bedroom in his castle. N is a very dynamic and complex character throughout the 5th generation of the Pokemon games. One of those characters where throughout the game you're not really sure whether you're rooting for or against him. And this really adds to the despair that is felt when you ultimately stumble upon his bedroom at the end of the game. His room is covered in childish memorabilia, some of which actually looks like it has recently been played with. And this really makes for a sad and chilling reminder of the upbringing that this character in the story had to endure, which led him to where he is in the story at that point. Jumping into Kanto and onto the Cinnabar Island, we have the next entry, which is the Pokemon Mansion. This is a mysterious and dangerous estate that Team Rocket actually used years ago to do a number of experiments in order to try to replicate and clone Mew, and is the site where Mewtwo itself was originally created and then escaped from. Today, this building is teeming with very dangerous poison and fire type Pokemon. And not to mention there is the very rare sighting of Ditto. And some people theorize that Ditto's presence here very well could hint to the fact that there is a connection between Mew and Ditto. Maybe even going as far as insinuating the fact that Ditto could potentially be a failed Mew clone. Next, we have one of my absolute favorite regions overall to date, being the Hoenn region. And we're traveling to Sea Mauville. And although this isn't directly tied to any form of spirit or direct event that is even scary, this place has always stuck out to me as being extremely unsettling. I think it's much like with Po Town, where if this was a real life location, it would just carry that post-apocalyptic feel to it that I think would give anybody the jitters when traveling through. But back to Kalos, we have the Lost Hotel. Once a luxurious and grand hotel, the envy of all other in Kalos, now decrepit and fallen to ruins, all because the original owner was run out by a competitor in a Pokemon battle. And the product of it falling into ruins is that it has now become a hotbed for ghost-type Pokemon, making it extremely unsettling to travel through. And finally for this category, we have none other than Lavender Town in Kanto. Nothing more than a sleepy town nestled in the foothills of the mountains just south of Rock Tunnel in the eastern part of Kanto, right? Also home originally to the Pokemon Tower, which was a 5-story Pokemon gravesite honoring deceased Pokemon from trainers all over the region. Another location that I actually specifically highlight a little bit further in this video. But the reason this town actually made this list is because some people find the simple and soothing melodies of the background tracking to be very unsettling. So much so that it was actually the focus of a creepypasta story over 10 years ago now. This story asserted that over 200 Japanese children committed suicide after hearing this song, while apparently countless others suffered from headaches, nosebleeds, and general dysphoria from the high-pitched binaural beats damaging their brains. Now, obviously this was completely made up and this didn't really happen in real life. However, it still adds to that air of mystery and unsettling feelings you get when traveling through this town. Moving along, we have the ancient sites of the Pokemon world. And there are quite a few ancient sites overall that definitely could have been on this list. However, I decided to stick to only a few that actually have a bit of paranormal presence to them, not just simply being strange happenings or specific events that take place regarding legendary or mythical Pokemon. And kicking off this list, we have probably one of my favorite locations of all, which would be the Ruins of Elf in Johto. Dark, mysterious runes, creepy, glitchy music, and cryptic messages written on the wall in an unknown language. See what I did there? Which, of course, with that, we have the presence of the unknown themselves, which this being one of the only in-game known locations to catch them. That is, of course, aside from the Salacian ruins in Sinnoh and Mirage Cave in Hoenn. As a child, I admittedly was always drawn to this location, and I always dreamed that I was going to be able to unlock some secret thing that was going to bring me to a rare Pokemon that nobody had ever seen before. Continuing along in Johto, we have the Burn Tower, which was once actually known as the Brass Tower. But then, over 150 years ago, a mysterious fire burned the tower down, and along with it perished 3 mysterious Pokemon. Though Lugia escaped to Whirl Islands, Ho-Oh ended up resurrecting these 3 mysterious Pokemon, and thus they became the legendary beasts, Raikou, Entei, and Suicune. And finally, for the ancient sites that carry paranormal activity, we have Turnback Cave in Sinnoh. Densely filled with fog and teeming with ghost-type Pokemon, this maze-like dwelling is the physical home for the terror itself, Giratina. Not to mention, it is extremely difficult to find, access, and traverse, making it a nightmare for the faint of heart. And the next category for terrifying places in the Pokemon world would be those I would consider haunted. First for this category, we have the previously mentioned Pokemon Tower in Kanto. As I said briefly before, this tower was known to be extremely haunted, as it was the final resting place of many people's beloved Pokemon. Now, eventually this tower was torn down in order for the Kanto radio station to be built, and then the House of Memories was built in its place to honor those deceased Pokemon as well. Though this memorial doesn't really seem to attract the same level of ghostly attention that the tower did. And as for the next 3 entries on this list, they're actually all very similar to the Pokemon Tower, as they are their region's given cemeteries for Pokemon. That being Mount Pyre in Hoenn, Lost Tower in Sinnoh, and Celestial Tower in Unova. And all 3 of these locations feature extremely creepy conditions such as foggy levels, blocked off areas, ghost Pokemon galore, and that overall feeling of helplessness as you're traveling through them. But moving along from there, we have the abandoned Thrifty Megamart in Alola. This shopping mall on Ula Ula Island has been overtaken by ghost-type Pokemon ever since it was utterly destroyed by Tapu Bulu when he was outraged that it was built upon sacred grounds. And truthfully, the ghost-type Pokemon at this location really don't like being disturbed, with sightings of an elusive Mimikyu and reports of a strange disappearing back room. And as a little bit of a fun side note, in this back room, there's actually a picture of Ash and Pikachu hanging on the wall. Onward now, we have the old chateau in Sinnoh. Sorry, I had to do it. This is a creepy old mansion in the woods that is filled with paintings that have glowing red eyes, statues that give off the aura that they're watching you, and even two ghostly apparitions of a butler and a young girl that can be seen in and out of various rooms. And all of this seems to somehow be connected to the Rotom that is found hiding in an upstairs television, with a standing theory from many in the community that maybe this Rotom had something to do with this family's disappearance and untimely death. Next up, we have the Marvelous Bridge in Unova. And not only is this the very first place that you encounter the Shadow Triad, which in and of itself is an extremely terrifying experience, but this is also the home of a ghostly apparition of a young girl who can be found here often, but then disappears as soon as you get close to her. It is speculated by the locals that she actually used to be seen playing on the grounds where the bridge was eventually built. And interestingly enough, she can actually also be found in Black and White 2 at the Strange House, which is next on this list. And in this encounter with her, things get even creepier when you listen to the dialogue that she has to say to you as the player character. An everlasting dark dream. An endless dream of darkness. In the dark dream, I heard my dad's voice. Forget about the lunar wing. Please just stay here with me. And on top of that, the ghostly girl actually purposefully rearranges furniture to force you to go into different rooms of the house. And numerous books throughout the library in the basement cover extremely dark topics, such as Drowsy and Hypno and the move Dream Eater, and Cresselia and Darkrai. And for the final category today, we have those locations located in dimensions outside of our own, starting with none other than the Distortion World. This is a topsy-turvy, upside-down, backwards working kind of world where our laws of physics have absolutely no bearing whatsoever. And this is somewhat a mirrored underworld of the Pokemon World, very similar to the Upside Down in the show Stranger Things. Yes, that's right, I watch Stranger Things, and I love it. But I digress, back to Pokemon. The Distortion World is the home of the terrifying legendary Pokemon Giratina. And it is actually theorized by many that the Distortion World was created by Giratina to balance the world of the living, as there are absolutely no Pokemon aside from it that actually inhabit this cold, dark realm. And speaking of cold, dark realms, we have Ultra Space. And honestly, this is a very strange place that's filled with crystal-like rock structures and inhabitants like Necrozma, Solgaleo and Lunala, and many members of the Cosmog evolutionary line. And ultimately, this is the space that connects all realms via ultra wormholes. Necrozma's light once spilled through these wormholes to all reaches of the universe. But then tragedy struck, and its light was scattered and broken. This left it in an internal rage and hunger to quench its need for light. And obviously, from the sounds of it, neither of these dimensions are extremely inhabitable or hospitable for human life to occupy them. And that would finish my look at all the terrifying locations scattered across the Pokemon world. Please let me know in the comments down below if there were any locations that I missed. As always, please consider liking and sharing and subscribing to my channel if you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to have a safe and happy Halloween.